Hello there, OrthoPreneurs, and welcome to the final installment, part 3 of the 2022 OrthoPreneurs podcast wrap-up. Now, in parts 1 and part 2, you heard some really amazing snippets from some remarkable guests. As I look at this and have listened to this, it is amazing, the eclectic nature of the people we've been lucky enough to get on the show from all walks of life, both from clinical and non-clinical, related to how to treat patients better, to how to live your best life, to how to stay healthier. And part 3 will not disappoint, I promise you. Remember, I've got to watch this entire thing and learn from it myself. And I got to tell you, we have just a huge number of people in this one. And I hope that their small snippets do them all justice. And I hope you enjoy it. And as I ask always, please, just subscribe to OrthoPreneurs podcast, like our podcast, share it on your own personal social media. And I think there's so many tips in part 3 that are going to help you change your life that it is essential that you pay attention. So with that, let's kick off part 3 recap of 2022. For anybody out there who's ever met Jeff Lee, you can understand why he becomes very quickly one of your favorite people on the planet. Practicing on the West Coast, we've become friends over the years, and I really love the passion, the true passion he brings to being an orthodontist. And interviewing him was amazing. In this particular snippet, he discusses how residency will make you competent, but it's really what you do afterwards that will define who you become as a clinician and the importance and value of good continuing education.
My first job was actually as an associate for about, I think it was like less than 2 months in Salinas, California. I just realized that, that's funny actually. Now that you brought up a topic, I realized how much I knew and didn't know after graduating residency. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, you come out of residency with a general foundation, but then you realize there's so many different approaches to how to treat a patient. And not saying one's better than the other, but it made me realize I need to get educated fast. I need to build up my continuing education to develop myself as an orthodontist.
God bless you.
Not saying that my residency didn't prepare me, but every residency has its pros and cons and how they teach and what they don't teach to the residents. And the only way you're going to be a better orthodontist is if you take the initiative yourself and learn, and I did that during my residency too. If anyone knows me from my own residency, I would be the guy accessing free webinars online. I think that was like one of the first times I found out about Adam Schulhoff's name, like other people's names out there. And I don't want to go into the names and details. I remember taking a surgery course with Tim Tremont, who's now the chairman of MUSC, but he was a pivotal faculty member at West Virginia for a while, and his practice was actually 20 minutes from my residence. Wow. So I was fortunate enough to take all 3 of his surgical courses. And do I know everything surgically now? No. I'm still learning, and I'm glad I have people in the profession to help guide me or give me input on and feedback on how I diagnose my cases, but it's great that, and I'm hoping with, Neil Kravitz and all these, and especially you, Glenn, bringing everybody together collegially, I think it's going to help us in the future to become stronger professionals.
I love that.
I'm not trying to stroke your ego. I'm just trying to be honest here. And, I think we're turning in the right direction.
There are a lot of people in the world of orthodontics who are going to teach you how to do clear aligner therapy. And to be honest, I can't think of one of them who I really haven't learned a ton from. One guy who's really helped me tremendously, and hopefully has helped you, is Barry Glazer. He is so smart, but so simple in some of the approaches he takes to some things. And I really do love his homespun wisdom. And in this particular clip, he's going to tell you a story about an interaction he had with one of the giants in orthodontics and relating it to continuing education. And he even draws a comparison from a pretty amazing movie and book.
Number one, I agree with Sean. I think number one is still always education. You know, when I was, I know we have to wrap it up. A quick story. So when I was second year ortho resident, the AAO meeting was in St. Louis, and I didn't have a penny. I literally didn't have a penny to my name. So everybody went off to St. Louis, but I didn't. But I came into the clinic every day. I didn't look at it as a vacation. I was doing lab work, and Dr. Gianelli walks in. And he says, "Barry, why aren't you at the meeting?" And I said, "Oh, Dr. G, I can't afford to go." And I'll never forget what he said, because he was like, Dumbledore. He was like Dumbledore and Gandalf all wrapped up into one. And he had those little half-moon glasses, and he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Barry, let me tell you something. When it comes to continuing your education, you can't afford not to go." And he like smiled and walked out. And like, it took me 30 years to figure out exactly what I meant. So you can't afford not to keep up with education, which brings me to another quick story. And my second tip, which is one of my favorite movies, is Moneyball. The great general manager, Billy Bean, and in a pivotal scene in the movie, looks at Art Howe, who's the old school, old dog, doesn't want to embrace technology analytics. And he looks at him and he says, "Adapt or die." And, the pace of innovation is so fast these days and it's scary. Change, even a little change in most people's practices is uncomfortable. It's unpleasant. It's not easy, but you have to adapt or die. So I think the more you train yourself and your mind and your staff to embrace change for the betterment, A, of the patients, and hopefully B, of the practice, I think the more you can get that kind of mindset, I think the easier, clear aligner treatment becomes.
Going back to the West Coast now, Dr. Sheldon Salins, you probably know him. He's spoken at OrthoPreneurs in the past. He's a dynamo, cuts his Snickers in a really weird way if you ever watched him on one of our interviews. But he makes some really good points about the fact that your practice is not ever going to be for everyone. And we as orthodontists have a really hard time accepting that. It just is what it is. We're perfectionists. And his point here that he's going to cover a bit in detail is that it's okay to accept it when things don't go the way they should, or that someone comes in where you get that feeling they shouldn't be a part of your practice, and that you really, really, really need to learn to protect yourself in what is sometimes a crazy social media or online review world today.
I talk to our brothers and sisters about protecting our castles that we work so hard to build and that we work in. Because just like OrthoPreneurs, you met those 2 people out of 400 people that said that, the meeting wasn't for them. Your office isn't going to be something for everybody. We try, but just like all the different types of malocclusions we deal with even more different types of personalities. And there are just some really difficult people out there. Even as the time of recording this, last week I got a 1-star Yelp review of some girl who I knew early on in our journey together we were not a good fit, and I tried to abort and it just didn't work out well, and I got my 1-star Yelp review. But you have to protect, you have to build a moat, an online moat, to protect your castle. And I just tell my brothers and sisters on how to do that, and who, everybody wants to, everybody thinks they know the type of person that writes the 5-star Yelp reviews, but a lot of them are misinformed. But then, I think this year I'm going to change it up a little bit and say, you don't need to have 1,000 5-star Yelp and Google reviews, because people don't really read that. What's the first thing, Glenn, you go to when you pull up a new restaurant in the area, and the first thing you're going to do is you look at the 1 stars.
First
right?
thing on Amazon. When I go on Amazon and there's 9,560 reviews, I go look to see what is the 1 and the 2-star or 3. The 3-star is what I look at.
Okay.
Because the 1 stars, just because you asked, the 1 stars are typically belligerent, angry, stupid. Like they'll talk about a restaurant. I came in, the food was amazing, everything's good, but the maitre d', looked at me the wrong way. I'm like, that's not a 1-star review, okay? The food was good. So I always look at the 3-star reviews, because they tend to be like, it was good, but here's where they could have gotten better. And I don't know, but you're right.
Yeah. So there's going to be a bit of my lecture that's kind of saying, hey guys and girls, 5 stars are great. And that's the A+ because all the orthodontists, that's how we got to where we go, is by getting the A+. But people, the real world doesn't care about the A+. They care about the Bs, So I tell people to kind of engage, throw a little 4 stars in there just because it makes your review and your profile online look a little bit more authentic. Yeah. And people don't, I had one colleague of ours called me not too long ago on a ledge, bro. He was in a bad place just because of a 1-star review. And I spent probably 3 or 4 weeks talking to that person, consoling him and kind of basically telling him, hey, welcome to the real world. B, not everybody's going to like you. C, now you need to very carefully. It's not something you can't get 1-star review and then freak out and then tell 20 people the next day to write a 5-star Yelp or Google review, because it's, Yelp is much smarter than that. They know that that's what we're doing. And the algorithm will take the reviews down. And it's okay, to when you get that 1-star review, because we will all get that 1-star review, either a parent divorce, or just somebody is just in a bad mood that day. Call me and talk to me. I might not know the answers on how to get that review down, but, sometimes you just need an ear to listen to what you have to say and vent and talk to, because, most people will like all of us. But there is that select few, and Yelp and Google have given tools to aid those difficult patients and parents that come into the office.
So this next clip is from someone I really respect and love a great deal. Dr. Shira Tor is just a remarkable human being. She's accomplished so much. I am so lucky to see her in our OrthoPreneurs RD group, and I get to interact with her on a more regular basis because she really is such a positive life force for me. Here she's going to talk about the importance of having a great support system in your life in order to find more happiness and obviously reduce your stress. But it's also really important for us to do something that many of us are just not good at, and that's become better delegators.
It's your support system, 100%. How I do it is I have a huge support system that I rely on. I can't do everything. My parents live 5 minutes away from me. My mom happens to be a pediatrician. So that's awesome when the kids are sick.
I
need your help.
That is a support system right there.
And I think and my parents have always said to me, you have to be a professional. You cannot rely on anybody except for yourself. And so growing up, I knew that I had to figure out a career that I could support myself in. Whatever it was, they didn't care. They just said, you're going to have to get a career that can support you and makes you happy, of course. If that's the same, even better. Right. And so I have my parents. We had nannies. I now have an au pair. My mother-in-law comes in and is very helpful as well. And so I just have a huge support system, and I know when I need to delegate certain things. And so when my kids are sick, they take priority. And again, this is why I have the most amazing partner, especially when I was an associate. If I called him and I was like, my kid is sick, he's like, stay home. I got the clinic. Don't worry. It's fine. Amazing. Yeah. So slowly we've had to kind of change that as, I've taken on more clinical time. But, now my parents don't work as much. And so they're able to stay home when the kids are sick. And I come home during lunch because I live really close.
That's awesome.
So it's just, you have to have a huge support system. And that's how you do it all. You can't do everything. So you have to figure out what you can do. And then everything else gets delegated to somebody else.
Now, many of you out there know Jamie Reynolds. If you don't know Jamie Reynolds, the quick backstory is this guy, to me, is like the Frank Sinatra of orthodontics. And that's not a moniker I gave him. That comes from a very well-respected person I know. But it's true. Jamie's got the debonair sophistication that I know I lack. But he's so smart, and he's such a dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur that we can learn a lot from him. And in this next little bit, he gives an amazing tip for everyone, no matter whether they ever want to join an OSO DSO or not. And he points out that the lack of oversight that many of us have or don't have in our practices can lead to some problems, not the least of which is what he's termed economic confirmation bias.
So OSO is that focusing on making the practice that you work in, whether you own it or you don't, the best place for your customers to come is what we should be doing as a profession, and, we could go around to the different group ones and we can judge about what's going on in theirs. Some may be better than we might hypothesize. Some may be a little worse, depending on who's managing or what particular practice it is. I know you have been too, Glenn, and I've been in a lot of different private practices. I've been in practices where the same case has multiple different styles of brackets on because they're cleaning out the bracket drawer. People that are in treatment, one office I looked at has a 72-month payment plan. And once you start in phase 1, then you just get a 72-month payment plan and you go all the way through. And any number of things in between with any number of different, what I would consider to be highly questionable practices in there. And the reality is a lot of us don't have a lot of oversight. And so, that lack of oversight over a long period of time has allowed us to have, in many cases, an exaggerated self-perception of what we're providing for our people. But we've still been paid very well for it. I call it economic confirmation bias, right? So because we've made a lot of money, it means that what we were doing is right. And that's really dangerous for our profession, So regardless of, what group you're in or not, or whether you own it or not, like not letting the dollars that we make dictate what our truth, is really important. And, I think it's up to us to continue to manage that. And the fact that we have let that get the better of us, the economic confirmation bias, is probably the reason why we have as many competitors as we do, because our customers are looking for something different. So regardless of what model you're in, I would suggest, all of us need to continue to be doing the right thing as best as we can and embracing change, not resisting it, regardless of what form that comes in.
In the last year, you've heard me talk a great deal about things like growing your practice, becoming healthier, and even more so, how to take home more of what you earn. Now, many people think that taking home more of what you earn means reducing your overhead, and that's part of it. But honestly and fairly getting the least amount of taxes paid is also part of that. And Alfonso Anderson was a guest who really gave some clarity, because he was a litigator against the IRS, about what the R&D tax credit is really all about and why he feels that this is something that every orthodontist should consider looking into.
The R&D tax credit is a credit that offsets tax liability based on research being done within the practice. And when you hear that term research, it's not the same research that you might hear in engineering and things like that. It's resolving uncertainty through a process of experimentation. So it's focused on the things that you're doing in your practice, those new techniques, those new products that you're creating in the practice, or what's qualified for the credit. And so there's a 4-part test that, as long as you meet, you qualify for the credit. You don't have to invent anything. You don't have to exceed or expand the industry itself based on the guidance that's out there. But once qualified, we're reclassifying wages, potential supply costs, and some contract research expenses to be able to take a credit for those, as opposed to just using them as expenses, as expenses are an above the line deduction that reduces your taxable income, where the R&D credit, when weaponized, reduces your tax liability, a dollar for dollar reduction.
If you've listened to me even a few times, you know that I'm a huge proponent of coaches, of people helping us get to the next level in our lives, because I don't believe we can do it ourselves. Maybe there's people out there, I am not one of them, you may not be as well. So my guest, David King, in this next clip, he discusses how orthodontists are so hard on themselves because he works with so many orthodontists, and why this spiral of downward mental health is so endemic to orthodontists, and better, how to turn it around to become a happier, more effective person.
You'll notice that you are having to force yourself to feel gratitude. In other words, if you rolled out the scroll of everything that you have in your life and, said that you weren't grateful to somebody, the tomato cans and things would start flying, or at least that you would imagine in your head. But with all this stuff, the blessing and charm life that we live, doctors will start to feel this lack of gratitude, even though they should be. And and then there's this feeling of chronic dissatisfaction that sets in, where they see, it's very, very difficult for them to see the joy and to see the blessings. and there's more irritation with themselves, with their staff, with their families, where they wouldn't normally be like that. And then they, in their mind, because they've been trained in their mind their whole career, they're like, I just need to, be, more kind, or I need to be more conscious around my kids, or I just need to be a better parent, or I really just need to listen more. And like, I'm going to fix it, right? Like teeth. I make this analogy all the time. So like when you're fixing teeth, it's like, perfection is the model. And so that's just what you do. And so you get in there and you fix it. And so this is a little bit more of a moving target, and it's a little bit difficult to pin down, especially on, especially on your own. And so there'll be, a team that you love, but you're feeling some resentment towards them, like just stuff like that goes on in your head. Like you said before, you're in the parking lot and you think, gosh, I really don't want to go in there today. Those kind of things. Or then, one level down from that, God, what's wrong with me? That's the kind of stuff that runs through somebody's head that has, let off the gas pedal on the self-care, and is like, reach out for somebody that can help sit down with you and get some of that stuff out, and then move forward with, like what we're talking about earlier, to look at the divine vessel, right? That's carrying around that magnificent, brain and experience and skill, what you're feeding it, how it's recharging, what's the sleep level like, a morning routine of some kind. Like, somebody asked me today, well, what do you think about journaling? And so I was telling them about journaling, and, they had that look on their face. And I was like, look, if you're not excited about it, then don't do it. It's like, what works for you? And so we'll find something that, we'll find something that works for you, that you're excited about, that you look forward to. Something I'm doing right now, and you could probably second this, and most people would, is that we're our harshest critic. And people will say that, like, I'm my harshest critic. And my experience is doctors have not even a smidgen of a clue how harsh of a critic they are in their own mind for their lives and their actions, in that, trying to, raise a family and be the best doctor and be there for the team and accomplish things for themselves, and how much that goes on.
Now, this next guest goes back with me literally over 35 years. He's a college friend of mine who I used to spend a great deal of time with, served in the military as a surgeon or as a physician. And if you sit and talk to him a little bit, you start finding him discussing things about how we can live longer with better health and better wellness. His is an episode that I think everybody on the planet should listen to, the entire thing. But he cites everything with literature and science behind it, so it's not hogwash. And in this particular clip, he's going to explain to you what's wrong with today's medical model and what we need to do to fix ourselves.
I'm not an orthodontist, but I imagine that, you don't have one treatment plan that you use for every single person that comes in the door.
No,
I'm imagining that there's, and having
I have
children
two.
that have
I have an A
before,
and a B.
I imagine that they had different, protocols, and so I can't ask you this question because you're you, and you don't have a 5-minute conversation with anybody because you're so, so friendly. But the average person knows me well. Spends about 5 minutes a year with their primary care doctor. Like that's about how much time the average person spends with their doctor. So what can you do in 5 minutes, really? I mean, you can write, it's easier to write a prescription, but can you really get to the root cause of anything?
Or prevention.
Or prevention, and even the things that we talked about this earlier, the things that we consider prevention, like colonoscopy, it's not prevention, it's early detection.
Right.
We're not preventing anything by having, colonoscopy doesn't prevent you from getting colon cancer. It just, if you happen to have colon cancer, you get to diagnose it a little bit earlier. And so in medicine, we do a lot of things that are symptom based. And we also, take this viewpoint that we don't need to worry about that yet. I've had patients that have come in that we've done evaluations and they're basically diabetic, but their A1C is just pre-diabetic. So their doctors have literally said to them, well, you're pre-diabetic, you should eat a little bit better, but we don't need to worry about it until you become diabetic. And you're like, oh yeah, diabetes mean the thing that causes cancer and heart disease and strokes and dementia. We should wait till that happens before we address it.
Right.
And, I'm of a belief that if you look closely, you can detect these things, years, maybe even decades before they become a problem. And if you can identify those things, then you can make those changes. And I'll give you a little military analogy. And, some people may not like this analogy, but I think it's an apt one. If I'm on the 100-yard rifle range and I've got a target 100 yards away from me and I fire my weapon and that bullet travels 99 yards, and let's say that target represents something I don't want, a chronic disease, heart disease, stroke, dementia, cancer. And that bullet is traveled 99 yards to the target. And I decide I don't want to have heart disease. I don't want to develop dementia. What can I do at that point to prevent the bullet from hitting the target? Well, short of God plucking that bullet out of the air, you're going to hit the target and you're going to have to deal with the consequences. Okay. Right. However, if I go to the rifle and I move that rifle 1 degree, just 1 degree, it's imperceptible. You can't even tell with your eye that 1 degree deflection. You know what that translates to on the 100-yard rifle range? Is a 6-foot miss. So, we can make changes early that have huge, exponentially larger consequences later on if we can identify those things early enough. And you can make very simple changes to lifestyle to make really a huge difference as we age. And the idea is, to have healthy 90 and 100-year-olds. And the fact is, we live in a time that we very well may see in our lifetime technologies that radically extend lifespan. Maybe, technology will come out that get us to live to be 120 and be fit and be mentally with it. If you're not healthy, when those technologies come, you're not going to be eligible for them. If you're riddled with chronic disease and your brain is tapioca from chronic insulin resistance and diabetes and hypertension and everything else, you're not going to be eligible because you've already done the damage. So the idea is maintain as high quality lifestyle and as high quality health and wellness as possible for as long as possible. I'm not interested in having fit, buff 90-year-olds who are drooling in a cup because they've got Alzheimer's. Right. Alzheimer's is skyrocketing, absolutely preventable. And not only that, but reversible, especially in the early stages, if you identify it early enough.
I am an investor with a company called Revere Partners. They are a venture capital firm that is open to investors from dentistry or any walk of life, and they invest in orthodontic and dental technology and companies. And Jeremy Krell is their founder. And in this interview, this clip we're about to go through, he explains the difference between venture capital and private equity, which we've all heard of, and how one of them looks backwards while the other looks forward.
In my world, and as in my opinion, and as it applies to the dental industry, key difference is it's two different but related languages, right? If your parents ever made you, learn Latin to prepare for the SATs,
I had to learn Hebrew for my bar mitzvah. It's as close. Right. It's as close as we're going to get.
Right. So Hebrew to one of the other Middle Eastern languages, Spanish to Italian, Portuguese. Right? These languages that are different but related, right? That is what these two represent. Where VC is looking at revenue, your top line revenue, and your projections for how you're going to grow forward looking. And that's where PE is a little bit more EBITDA based, right? Their lifeblood is this EBITDA. They're based on profit. They're backward looking, right? They're looking at historically how you performed as a predictor for your value. Whereas venture is looking forward at how you could perform as a predictor for your value, right? Those are really the key differences. Is one better than the other? We don't say that in this world, right? Because it's all about diversification of a portfolio. You should have investments in multiple different asset categories at multiple different, risk levels. If or at least if I were you, that's what I would do, right? From a compliance standpoint. So that's really one way to look at the difference between venture and private equity.
But like I said, most orthodontists and dentists, are they going to have access to VC money typically? Because until I met you, I had no idea how to get involved in VC investing.
Yeah. So one of the challenges in getting into VC is that most traditional fund structures, they raise money and then they close the fund. And then the fund deploys or invests all of its capital. And then not until the fund managers the general partners open up another fund, do you have a chance. And that, again, that window is 6, 12, 18 months. It's short, right? So unless you've heard about it in that time frame, unless you know somebody, usually, unless your investment thesis or check size matches with what they're looking for, it's otherwise very tough to get into. Right. And we wanted to kind of turn that model on its head in this industry. So this VC fund, Revere Partners, is created by doctors for doctors. We have created a model whereby we cater to many different investor types. High net angel investors, that's doctors, dentists, lawyers, professional types, right? All the way to high net worth individuals, family offices, funds, and corporates, public, private, inside, outside dental, right? All what you need to be is what we call an accredited investor. That's simply a threshold to pass. It's not a license you need to have, right? It's based on your income or based on your net worth.
Anybody who's ever been to the OrthoPreneur Summit and been to the team track has probably met my good friend Gustavo Sanchez. Gustavo has a great story. If you ever listen to the full podcast episode we did together, he started as a patient of mine, actually the husband of a patient of mine who ultimately became a patient and ended up working in the practice and doing some amazing things with us, and then moving on to the next step in his life, which is just remarkable impact in the orthodontic world. And he's a very thoughtful kind of guy. He's a great example of somebody who may not have gone for a PhD or a master's, but has so much wisdom. And in this clip, he's going to discuss with you how the ego can create problems for us and how what he calls inconvenience can often help us get the best version of ourselves.
You said something a second ago, which was about ego. So for me, I tended to remind people of something that sticks with me, which is we have two choices. We can either feed our ego or we can feed our families.
Oof,
and so the thing with that is that I remind people that the ego is never satisfied and will always crave more. So be careful how you choose. And so I think a lot of the times with individuals is it's easy to be a victim. Matter of fact, it's convenient. And so I always want people to know that you cannot find any of the greats that made it to the level that they made it. I don't care if it's spiritual, physical, financial, emotional. You don't get to the next level from convenience. It all stems from inconvenience. And so we have to remember that the push is needed and it's important. And so when I talk to team members, I want them to know that, when you make a phone call or when you have an interaction with the patient, you already know that it could have gone better or did you do the right thing? But you know what people don't do? They don't expose it. And so I highly recommend, don't wait for you to be caught. Go and say, hey, this is the conversation that I had with this patient. I just wanted to get another perspective. What do you think? And because what happens is now you're setting yourself up to receive. But it's no different than someone kicking your door down. What are you going to do? You don't know who's coming. So you're going to be ready. You're going to be ready to defend your home. But when someone knocks, you open the door and you invite them in.
Pa Rultaneja is a remarkable human being. If you've spent time with her, you understand that she's so much more than just an orthodontist. She really, really, really will help you understand how you're feeling if you're ever spending time with her. She's really in touch with her emotions, and she makes everybody around her better. And in this particular short clip, she's going to give you some sage advice to hopefully help you live your best life.
I want everyone to know one last thing. It ain't over till you're 6 feet under. It's never too late. It's never that the ship has sailed. Whatever you are finding to do, longing to do, listen to that voice and do it in small increments. It will grow. It'll build. It'll compound.
Colin Corey used to be one of the head engineers for Henry Schein Orthodontics, and that's where I met him when I used to be a KOL for that company. And we had some great times together talking, discussing innovation. He's a really forward-thinking kind of guy who just sees the world differently, and thankfully, because he helps make our lives better. And as the co-founder of Braces on Demand, which is a remarkable technology that I do have a stake in, he talks about what makes it work so well and why 3D printing technology has actually completely changed the way we provide options for our patients.
3D printing in orthodontics is actually, it's a great industry to have 3D printing as a manufacturing technology, because you can create things that are incredibly custom to patients, or you can create things that are generic for patients, and you can do it in a very quick time frame. We're not talking about making, big airfoils and big parts on a 3D printer. We're talking about really tiny stuff. So relatively fast print times, and printer technology, it's a really cool type of technology because it's improved so much just in the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
And we're talking about 10 years ago, 3D printers were light years behind where we're at today. And 10 years from now, we're going to be doing things that we can't even imagine today. Yeah. And so it's a really cool technology. Materials are constantly improving. They're getting faster, more accurate, and they're getting to be pretty easy to use. They weren't always easy to use, and now they're so easy to plug into a practice and get 3 little machines and print it, wash it, cure it, and away you go.
I have no doubt you've heard stories of offices being hacked, of ransomware. Most recently, I was told that here in Dallas, where I live, you couldn't even log on to see your property taxes because the website had been shut down because of a ransomware attack that the city did not want to pay. And so this is something that's unfortunately become a part of our day-to-day lives. Now, you might have an IT company that manages your database or manages your firewall. But as Gary Salmon from Black Talent is about to tell you, there's a part of security that can play a huge role in our safety online and in our practices, and how the company you think is protecting you may not actually be doing as good of a job as you think they are.
I think there's one key component to security that a lot of folks don't really think about, and that's third party, right? So what I say to every orthodontist that says, well, my IT company has me, I'm secure, I say to them, well, how do you actually know that? Not in technical terms, but how do you actually know that? And I'll ask them, do you receive reports every month from your IT vendor showing you, A, all the holes in your security, and then B, that they're actually being fixed? Right. And I rarely, if ever, get a positive response. And I think that's when the orthodontist starts saying, all right, I think I understand what you're talking about. So having a third-party cyber company like ours come in and work hand in hand with your IT company to constantly analyze the computers and firewalls to determine where you're vulnerable, where hackers are going to breach, that's the most important thing you can do, right? The risk here, and I'm not being dramatic, but the risk here is substantial, right? It's probably, one of the most riskier endeavors that you can deal with because, malpractice is covered, fire is covered, things like that. But when you get hit with ransomware, it's life-changing. You talk to many orthodontists, and we had, a good discussion about a year and a half ago with one of your colleagues, Dr. Krieger, where she was hit with ransomware shortly after buying a practice. And she basically said, I'm done. I'm done being an orthodontist. Like, I can't deal with this. Yeah, she had the FBI in her office, trying to resolve it. And she just said, I give up. It's nothing I ever imagined happening to me. And, the impact was so damaging, emotionally and mentally and everything. For weeks, she thought she may have lost her entire livelihood. And this is very common. It doesn't matter if you're in practice for 6 months, or 6 years, you're literally watching your practice, disappear in front of you. You can't control it, right? As much as we want to control what's happening, you can't. You're dealing literally with criminals that are in foreign countries that are hiding behind computers and networks. So I think by implementing a third party like a cyber firm to analyze your network and tell you where you have risk, and then you as the orthodontist getting to make decisions on how to address that risk is really where it's at. And frankly, outside of the dental space, this is how almost all businesses function. Right? Yeah. They work with an IT company plus cyber because they want to know for a fact, hey, am I secure? Am I not? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to get secure? instead of just doing like kind of what you said, which is the firewall and the antivirus, which is what everyone has. It doesn't work anymore.
Sima Jacoby Epstein is an entrepreneur. Spend time with her. You will have a hard time hanging on because she's got amazing ideas and she's got a great background in understanding the dental disease, the pathology behind a lot of the problems people face on a day-to-day basis in our practices. And in this clip, she's going to talk about the importance of helping patients get past disease states and how each of us actually plays a role if we want to achieve this goal.
I think it's really important for all of us in the industry to understand that we are all a part and a piece of this puzzle. So whether the patient is, doing well and their oral hygiene is, amazing throughout, then we have basically made them progress to a whole nother level so that they can avoid, sort of disease states that are inevitable, like cavities and periodontal disease, which we already know that are linked to systemic diseases. So my research and my science-driven brain has always been to understand, the bacteria that is in your mouth at the very main level, right? You have the process of halitosis, and many people are sort of magically inspired by where is this halitosis coming from? And there's so many components to it. But one of the things we're creating is really to understand where it's coming from so that as a patient, you have the ability to know, is it coming from your gum line? Is it coming from your tongue? Is it coming from a cavity? So these sort of gram-negative, gram-positive bacteria are sort of demystified for you as a lay person and being in a patient. So that's one part of it, right? That gives us more access to our patients to be able to prevent a lot of things that could potentially go wrong over the course of 3 years of treatment. On the second level, it's the analyzer detector, which again, science has already proven out. There's tons of bacteria that are linked to certain disease states. They all exist in the mouth. So they've all been verified, whether it's linking the bacteria in your saliva to neurological disorders like Alzheimer's, like cancer, gastrointestinal disorders, obviously heart disease, as we know. We have all this information, but there's no economic way of being able to source and prevent early on and being able to understand where or how it's happening. So the idea is that this sort of vehicle will be a way of having dentists, orthodontists be able to create a database for patients early on. So it's something that will collect evidence of what bacteria exists in their mouth and being able to prevent any of the disease states we just mentioned, specifically oral cancers that we know about. And this will help to basically change the industry in the way that we help patients early on.
Paul Edwards from Cedar is a man of many talents. Aside from being a competition-level barbecuer, I have no doubt, even though he's never admitted to it, I have no doubt this guy plays like 35 instruments or something like that, because he's such a well-rounded human being, and I love the advice he always gives, especially because he lives in the world that many of us struggle with, which is HR. And in this particular clip, he's going to explain something he calls intentional hiring and how it can actually help you live a far better business and HR life.
Intentional your hiring process is, the better results you're going to get. So, Glenn, I'm just going to give you an example of something that we do intentionally here at Cedar. Sure. I think this is the best way for me to explain what I mean by intentional hiring. You can imagine that one of the jobs here, one of the main jobs here is you're a solution center advisor. You're an HR expert. That means that you're holding you're either holding a law degree, or you're holding some advanced, maybe an MBA, or you have a level of experience where maybe you worked at Target for 12 years and worked your way up through HR, and we stole you from Target. I have investigators, former investigators from state agencies, wage and hour agencies on the team. We're looking for those kinds of expertise. But you can imagine that with the number of members that we have, and it's over 2,500 members, they get to hear the same questions over and over and over again. They have to keep answering them. And one of our core values is we have to meet the member. So Glenn, if you call in, we got to meet you where you're at in your HR journey. So if you've just started your practice and never managed people, we probably need to have a different conversation with you than when you've been at it for 30 years and you've dealt with this and you're just looking for some help. Right. So one of the intentional things we do in the hiring process in the Solution Center is those folks get interviewed by 3 different people. And we keep asking a few of the same technical questions over and over and over again. And what we find is that if they get frustrated, and we've actually had a couple do it, we'd say, you look a little frustrated. And they'd say, I'm getting tired of answering this question. You asked me this question, and then the other person asked me this. I feel like I've answered it over and over and over again. And automatically, intentionally, we know they're never going to survive as a Solution Center member. Because they can't be annoyed by having to answer the same question. If what they want is something new and different every day, we can provide that in a different way, in training and in expanding on their experiences. We can do it in something that both is professionally good for them and for us. But the job is to answer the damn question, answer it well, answer it compassionately and within our core values. So you can do that in your practice. So if someone comes in and says, wow, there's a lot of technical need here, and I try to work between 3 programs, and this is a multitasking position, and I hate multitasking, then you screwed up when you put them into that position. You assume that if they were 27 years old, they were great with technology and weren't going to be annoyed by it. I don't really like people. I don't like people, and I particularly don't like people who are whining, and your patients are pretty whiny. I'm out of here. I didn't realize that I was going to be held so accountable. I thought that I could be 10 minutes late to work. I didn't realize that when I'm 10 minutes late, I throw the whole thing off. I mean, I can't be here at 8. Are you kidding me? Do you know what's going on out there in the world? There's traffic and I hope, I'm being a little facetious, Glenn, but
not really.
I'm pointing out things, and I can't do this for you. I can just tell you how to think about it and what to look at. And to every time a hire fails, look at yourself. Look at how you hired them, what you said to them, and what you put them through to get them there. Yeah. There in the chair in your business doing whatever the job is.
Dr. Nicole Scheffler is so smart. If you spend time chatting with her about anything, you'll see the thoughtfulness and wisdom that she sort of gives you. Now, unlike a lot of the other clips here that have been talking about ways for us to live better lives, personally, Nicole is going to talk a little bit about open anterior bites and how she uses TADs to help actually close them.
Now, with open bites, though, I do feel that a lot of people are thinking that you can just close it with aligners now. And yes, but I do feel that TADs are indicated. So that's kind of been my latest push was when I started lecturing for Ormco on vector TADs, I helped develop the anterior open bite splint and was using TADs in conjunction with that open bite splint to be able to intrude the posteriors to do things similarly to orthognathic surgery, and, looked at the stability of it and long-term research for it and published that in the AJO. And so, knowing that's just as stable as jaw surgery, I feel like there are other means to be able to closing open bites rather than just having to do jaw surgery now. But now I'm doing it with spark aligners and TADs, so it's just a little different way. But I still recommend an anterior open bite framework similar to the open bite splint, and using springs from the TADs to this open bite framework just to be able to intrude to close open bites more predictably and I think more stable than a lot of times what we're seeing with just closing them with spark liner or with just aligners alone is that we're getting extrusion of the anterior. So that's why I do recommend doing it with TADs.
Arguably one of the biggest contributors to our generation of orthodontics, particularly in the world of aesthetics and surgery, is Dr. David Sarver. And I was a cosmetic dentist for 2 decades. And even when I sit around Dr. Sarver, there are tips and comments and words he uses that make me think differently. And you ever heard of smile projection? You've heard of smile arc. You've heard of smile line. But smile projection is something he likes to talk about. And so one of the masters of our generation, orthodontists, is going to talk a little bit about smile projection in this next clip, as well as what he calls the social view, which is a very different way of looking at the aesthetics and how we treat patients.
Well, smile projection actually is something that evolved, really about 3 or 4 years ago. So I hadn't been in practice even 40 years to figure it out. But as you and I covered this weekend, I'd cover a lot of my photography is not straight on, not profile, but it's in the oblique view, which is what I term the social view, which is how patients are seen. And frankly, and this probably is how I'll lead into the lecture, that it occurred to me, I had a surgery case, someone who had already been operated on. And by the way, a lot of the lessons I've learned are from my surgical cases. But she was somebody that we did a bimaxillary advancement on and a couple other things. But she was just stunning. And I just, Tricia, my treatment coordinator of 39 years now, and I were sitting there trying to dissect it and go, we made, moderate, not massive movements. What made the difference in that case? And it led to two concepts. One is smile projection and the other is gradation. So as I really took that case apart, it occurred to me that that's really two ways to look at a smile. One that recedes, and that's what got orthodontics in trouble, was
right
a lot more extractions than we do now, and teeth being retracted into the face. And we always talk about treating to the face. Okay, so that's really where it lives, is that I can retract a smile or I can project it. As Bill Prophet used to say, anything can be overdone, all right, so that you don't want to make it ridiculous. But it sort of really changed how I look at people. It's part of my clinical examination now that we didn't cover this weekend, but part of my clinical examination is to look at the patient and then to move to the side and look at the patient and how they smile and the angulation of the upper incisor, how many teeth are shown on the oblique view. And then the gradation is what is the size of those teeth progressively from anterior to posterior. And so it really has been a game changer for me. Well, game changer, I hate that cliche. It's used a lot. So I'll use, it's different. I have published it in the Journal of Aesthetic and Restorative Dentistry because it is something that I want the dentist, and you practice how long as a general dentist?
20 years.
Yeah. That it's something that I want you to know that as an orthodontist, we're looking at. And so we got hammered for retracting smiles. It's different. We're looking at smiles, not just as a smile arc, not just as incisor display, but in all three dimensions. So it's really been something that has changed how I diagnose and look at things.
Dr. Sophie Acker from Europe is a remarkable clinical influence in dental monitoring. And in this clip, she's going to talk and explain actually how the best who work with remote monitoring and the best protocols of remote monitoring with dental monitoring are when humans and technology actually work hand in glove for an effective outcome. One can't function very well, potentially, without the other. So let's dive on in and hear it.
I think really the product is meant to be used by a specialist. We work with just the product itself, and you're a user yourself. You have to set your protocols. It's not magical. An ortho has to do it because you basically take your own practice workflow on how you manage a case when A, B, or C happens, and you tell the system what you want to do. So the system is going to see what happens, but the system doesn't know what to do with it until you tell the system what to do with it, right? Which is why the protocols are really the core of the system. And that's how I like to explain it, is you put your brains and you put your experience, your own experience and your own practice, workflows and protocols into the system, right? So to work with DM, you can't just register and start working with it. As you might know, you have to go through the teams and get trained. So there is that funnel that ensures that this is clinically done by specialists. This is what the product is meant to do, And as I said earlier, and it's really for me very important, it's developed by doctors for doctors. And this is our positioning.
Well, that's it for 2022. At least here it is. You've gotten 3 different parts. If you haven't heard all 3, just go to YouTube or Spotify or Apple, wherever you go, and you can listen to any one of the 3. If somebody you listened to really resonated with you, go and listen to the entire podcast. Of course, always go to orthopreneurs.com where you can learn more about what we do in our online education and summit and all those great things. But I want to say thank you to all of you for being a part of this podcast, because without you, this would not be happening. And please, as I always ask you, please become a subscriber. I promise we're going to have even better stuff as we learn more and more in the next year. Subscribe to be updated. Share this on your social media. Like it. It means the world to me. And I just want to wish everybody here a really amazing, effective, profitable, healthy, meaningful, thoughtful, joyful, and collaborative 2023. Remember, I'm always here for you in any way I can. And my mission is to help orthodontists lead more profitable, lower stress lives. Wishing you all the best and take care.